Havana's Great Bluff. Why Cuba's Museum Army is no match for 2026 U.S. power. 15 nautical miles north of Cuba's territorial waters, the USS Iwo Jima maintains positional geometry consistent with amphibious ready group doctrine. MCON Delta Protocol. Zero electromagnetic signature. The vessel exists as a data point on our strategic display, but remains invisible to Cuban sensor networks operating 40-year-old technology with detection thresholds measured in square meters of radar cross-section. Cuban state media broadcast imagery of armor movement along Havana's coastal infrastructure on the 16th of January. 73 T-55 main battle tanks. Manufacture dates between 1961 and 1973. V-54 12-cylinder diesel engines producing 520 horsepower when new. Current operational status degraded by metallurgical fatigue, inconsistent maintenance cycles, and fuel contamination that will be addressed in detail. The mobilization directive pulled 18,000 reserve personnel from civilian economy. Standard Soviet-era doctrine. Issue small arms, activate unit structures, demonstrate state capacity for military response. The demonstration itself consumes resources at rates incompatible with Cuban strategic petroleum reserves. This is the mathematical core of the analysis. Let me provide the fuel consumption breakdown with precision. Cuba maintains 3 primary petroleum storage facilities. Matanzas Tank Farm, capacity 4.2 million barrels. Cienfuegos Complex, capacity 6.8 million barrels. Santa Cruz del Norte underground storage, capacity 4 million barrels. Total strategic reserve, 15 million barrels as of January 1, 2026. Daily consumption prior to mobilization, 160,000 barrels. Power generation sector consumes 90,000. Transportation infrastructure, 35,000. Industrial operations, 20,000. Agricultural mechanization, 15,000. This baseline existed with Venezuelan supply providing 100,000 barrels daily under PDVSA concessionary agreements. On January 16th, that supply terminated. U.S. operational control of PDVSA northern distribution networks executed through diplomatic economic integration protocols. The valve closed. No replacement source exists. Russian tanker traffic to Cuban ports dropped to zero after the December sanctions package. Chinese crude shipments remain theoretical. Ours constrained by payment mechanisms Cuba cannot access. The mobilization added consumption vectors. Each T-55 tank consumes approximately 200 liters per 100 kilometers under operational conditions. 73 tanks conducting urban movement patterns for broadcast media consumed an estimated 14,600 liters in the first 24 hours. Call it 92 barrels for theatrical purposes. The BTR-60 armored personnel carriers, 240 units activated for reserve integration, consume 250 liters per 100 kilometers. Mobilization movement patterns, checkpoint rotations, patrol profiles, another 18,000 liters daily, 113 barrels. Fuel trucks supporting the logistics tail, another 40 vehicles, diesels running continuously. Through command post generators for reserve unit activation centers, 32 locations, field kitchens, communications relay stations, vehicle maintenance operations. The addition of mobilization to baseline consumption elevated daily burn rate to 210,000 barrels, against a reserve of 15 million barrels with zero resupply. Simple division. 71.4 days at baseline, 57.1 days under mobilization level. But this calculation assumes fuel quality remains constant. It does not. The petroleum in Cuban strategic storage has been cycling through the same tank since the Soviet supply lines collapsed in 1991. Fuel degradation occurs through oxidation, microbial contamination, and thermal cycling. Diesel fuel begins forming sediments and gums within 6 months of refining. The fuel currently in Cuban T-55 tanks has been in storage rotation for periods measured in years. Degraded fuel reduces engine performance, clogs fuel filters, damages injection systems. A T-55 designed to operate for 500 kilometers on internal fuel capacity might achieve 350 with contaminated diesel. The engine works harder, burns hotter, consumes more fuel to produce less power. The metallurgical stress accelerates component failure. Under normal conditions, military fuel stocks receive additive packages, biocides to prevent microbial growth, stabilizers to slow oxidation, cetane improvers to maintain ignition quality. These additives require chemical industry capacity and import access. The Donro Doctrine eliminated Cuba's ability to import these materials. The Venezuelan supply included additive-treated fuel. That supply no longer exists. What remains in Cuban tanks is degrading fuel that damages the engines burning it, reducing operational range while increasing consumption rates. The mathematical model becomes nonlinear. Performance degradation accelerates as fuel quality declines. Thermal imaging from surveillance assets detected T-55 engine temperatures 23% above doctrinal parameters during the Havana parade. Incomplete combustion, fouled injectors. These are engines dying as they operate. Now examine the sensor environment. The AN/SPY-6 radar system aboard Arleigh Burke. Flight 3 destroyers operates in X-band, frequencies between 8.0 and 12.0 GHz, solid-state gallium nitride transmitters, are digital beamforming with simultaneous multi-beam capability. The system tracks ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, aircraft, and surface contacts while conducting electronic warfare and communications functions in parallel. Processing architecture uses application-specific integrated circuits operating at clock speeds measured in gigahertz. The radar computer updates target tracks 30 times per second, correlates data from networked sensors across the battle group, and feeds automated engagement systems that execute intercept solutions faster than human cognition. Cuba's air surveillance depends on P-18 spoon rest radars, Soviet design from 1970. VHF band, frequency range between 140 and 170 MHz. The system uses vacuum tube technology. Actual vacuum tubes, ours like what your grandfather's radio used. The transmitter generates pulses through magnetron tubes that require warm-up periods. The receiver processes returns through analog circuits with response times measured in milliseconds. Target data appears on cathode ray tube displays where human operators manually plot positions using grease pencils. There is no digital processing. There is no automated tracking. There is no network integration. The P-18 detects aircraft within its frequency band at ranges up to 250 kilometers under ideal conditions. It provides bearing and range. Altitude estimation requires separate systems. The Nemesis electronic warfare package exploits this technological disparity through signal injection. The system analyzes enemy radar characteristics, determines pulse repetition frequency, beam width, ice modulation patterns. Then it transmits false return signals precisely calibrated to appear legitimate to the receiver. Against digital radars with sophisticated signal processing, this technique faces countermeasures. Frequency agility, pulse compression, coherent integration, correlation algorithms that distinguish genuine returns from fabricated signals. Against analog vacuum tube receivers processing signals through resistor-capacitor circuits, there is no defense. The P-18 cannot distinguish between electromagnetic energy reflected from an actual aircraft and electromagnetic energy generated by Nemesis to mimic that reflection. The physics are identical from the receiver's perspective. When Nemesis projects Phantom aircraft into Cuban radar coverage, operators observe returns that match doctrinal threat profiles. So high-speed contacts at ranges consistent with carrier-based strike packages. Multiple simultaneous approaches suggesting coordinated attack profiles. The returns persist, they move, they present all characteristics of genuine threats. Doctrine requires response. The SA-3 GOA surface-to-air missile system engages targets beyond gun range. Each missile represents resources Cuba cannot replace. The act of launching creates electromagnetic signatures our SIGINT platforms collect. The operators reveal their positions, their readiness status, their decision-making patterns, and the missiles guide toward empty sky. The phantom contacts evaporate. The missiles self-destruct. The launchers sit empty, the crews demoralized, the command structure facing a problem they cannot solve with available technology. This creates cognitive cascade failure in the command network. A Cuban air defense commander faces a decision matrix. Contact appears on radar. Is it genuine or fabricated? Doctrine says engage. Experience says the last 12 engagements hit nothing. Does he launch and waste irreplaceable missiles? Does he hold fire and allow potential genuine threats to pass? The decision point is not tactical. It is epistemological. The commander has lost confidence in his ability to perceive reality. His sensors feed him information he cannot trust. His doctrine demands actions that produce no results. His superiors demand explanations he cannot provide. This is cognitive paralysis. The commander's decision cycle extends from minutes to hours as he second-guesses sensor data. He delays engagement while seeking confirmation through alternate means that do not exist. He requests guidance from higher command that is equally uncertain. The OODA loop collapses. Observation becomes unreliable. Orientation to the tactical situation becomes impossible when you cannot distinguish real threats from phantom ones. Decision-making freezes. Action becomes random. Meanwhile, actual strike packages maneuver through sensor gaps, approach from unexpected vectors, employ terrain masking and altitude profiles the P-18 cannot track. By the time Cuban commanders recognize genuine threats, weapons are already in flight. The information advantage is not additive. It is multiplicative. American forces observe the battlefield through satellite reconnaissance, signals intelligence, radar coverage, human intelligence networks. We correlate these sources through automated fusion systems that build comprehensive common operational pictures. Cuban forces observe through point sensors with limited range, no integration, no correlation capability. They receive information fragments hours late from sources they cannot verify. The decision-making disparity matches the sensor disparity. American tactical commanders access real-time intelligence, predictive analysis, automated course of action development. Cuban commanders work from maps, verbal reports, and assumptions based on doctrine written before microprocessors existed. When an American F-35 pilot receives target coordinates, those coordinates derive from multiple confirmed sources, updated continuously with precision measured in single-digit meters. When a Cuban MiG-29 pilot receives intercept vectors, those vectors come from a ground controller reading a radar scope with accuracy measured in kilometers, delayed by communications lag, potentially based on Nemesis-generated phantoms. The MiG pilot does not know his information is corrupted. He follows vectors toward contacts that may not exist. His radar seeks targets beyond its effective range. His missiles lock nothing. He burns fuel he cannot replace, returns to base, and files reports that deepen the command paralysis because nobody can explain the pattern of failures. This is information warfare. Not in the theoretical sense, in the concrete sense of systematically destroying an adversary's ability to perceive, decide, and act. Cuba's coastal defense cruise missiles present similar analytical conclusions. The SSC-3 Sticks operates with active radar homing in terminal phase. I-range 80 kilometers, subsonic flight profile, radar cross-section easily detected by shipboard systems. For the missile to engage, it requires targeting data. That data comes from coastal radar sites using variants of the same P-18 technology. If those radars see phantom targets, the missiles launch toward empty ocean. If those radars are suppressed by electronic attack, the missiles cannot acquire targets. If genuine targets exist, those targets are protected by layered defense systems. The AN/SPY-6 detects the Stick's launch immediately. Automated engagement sequences activate. SM-2 or SM-6 interceptors launch from vertical cells. Close-in weapon systems provide terminal defense. Electronic warfare systems jam the Styx's guidance radar. A single Arleigh Burke destroyer carries 96 vertical launch cells. Mix of weapons depends on mission profile but assume 30 anti-air missiles. That destroyer can engage 30 simultaneous threats. Cuba's entire coastal defense missile inventory is approximately 40 launchers. The mathematics are unambiguous. Examine the naval infantry capability. Cuban naval infantry numbers approximately 3,000 personnel. Equipment includes BTR-60 amphibious personnel carriers and naval versions of the T-55 tank. Their amphibious assault capability depends on Polnokny-class landing ships, Soviet design from 1967. The Polnokny displaces 1,000 tons, carries 6 tanks or 10 armored vehicles, and beaches to discharge cargo. Maximum speed, 10 knots. No helicopter capability. No standoff weapons. No stealth characteristics. Compare to the American LCAC hovercraft. The landing craft air cushion displaces 182 tons fully loaded, carries 1 M1 Abrams tank or 180 troops, operates at speeds exceeding 40 knots, deploys from amphibious ships 25 nautical miles offshore. The LCAC crosses beaches, mudflats, obstacles that would stop conventional landing craft. The MV-22 Osprey tiltrotor carries 24 combat-equipped Marines at cruise speeds of 270 knots, over ranges exceeding 300 nautical miles. It inserts forces from beyond visual range, lands in zones inaccessible to helicopters, extracts under fire using speed conventional rotorcraft cannot match. The mobility differential means American forces appear where Cuban defenses are not. Move faster than Cuban reaction times permit. And consolidate positions before opposition can organize. But this analysis assumes combat occurs. The fuel consumption data suggests combat may be unnecessary. At current burn rates, Cuban strategic reserves reach critical levels in 43 days. Critical meaning insufficient fuel to maintain power generation and basic transportation simultaneously. At that point, the government faces a choice. Maintain electricity to Havana and let the military stop moving, or fuel the military and let the civilian infrastructure collapse. Either choice represents strategic defeat. A military that cannot maneuver is not a military. A government that cannot provide electricity loses legitimacy. The third option, attack, presumes Cuban forces can inflict sufficient damage to change the strategic calculation. This presumption fails when examined against capability data. Cuban air forces operate 24 MiG-29 fighters with an estimated 8 aircraft mission, capable on any given day. These aircraft carry R-73 short-range and R-77 medium-range air-to-air missiles. The R-77 has a range of 80 kilometers against cooperative targets. The AIM-120D missile carried by American fighters has a range exceeding 160 kilometers with active radar guidance and data link updates. The engagement occurs beyond visual range. Cuban pilots never see the aircraft killing them. The MiG-29's radar, the N019 Topaz, is a pulse Doppler system with limited look-down capability and high susceptibility to electronic countermeasures. The APG-81 radar in the F-35 is an active electronically scanned array with low probability of intercept characteristics, synthetic aperture ground mapping, and simultaneous air and surface target tracking. The sensor advantage translates directly to kill ratios. The side that detects first, identifies first, and engages first wins. The side flying blind dies without firing a shot. Ground-based air defense faces the same calculation. The SA-3 GOA missile has a maximum range of 25 kilometers and requires radar guidance throughout flight. The radar must continuously illuminate the target. This makes the launcher visible to anti-radiation missiles. The AGM-88 EAARGM homes on radar emissions continues toward last known position if the radar shuts down and has a range exceeding 150 kilometers. The launcher operator detects nothing until the warhead detonates. Suppression of enemy air defenses is not a battle. It is an execution checklist. Identify emitters, prioritize by threat level, assign weapons, confirm destruction, move to next target. The process completes before defenders understand they are under attack. The strategic assessment concludes with high confidence that Cuban military forces cannot achieve operational objectives against American power projection. The capability gap is not marginal, it is categorical. This is not ideological analysis, this is thermodynamics, metallurgy, electromagnetics, information theory. These are physical laws that do not negotiate. The fuel will run out, the engines will fail, the sensors will deceive. The command structure will collapse under cognitive load it cannot process. These outcomes are deterministic. The American military advantage in 2026 derives from 75 years of compounding investment in technology, training, doctrine, and industrial capacity. The advantage is not courage or will or revolutionary spirit. The advantage is mathematics. We built sensor networks that perceive the battlefield comprehensively. We built processing systems that translate perception into decision faster than humans think. We built weapons that execute decisions with precision, measured in meters from distances measured in hundreds of kilometers. Cuba built nothing. Cuba maintained equipment built by a nation that no longer exists, using an economic system that failed based on military doctrine written when computers filled buildings. The T-55 tank was adequate technology in 1965. It is a museum piece in 2026, not because it looks old, because the fundamental physics of armor, weapons, sensors, and mobility have evolved beyond its capacity to remain relevant. This is what victory through informational superiority means. The war concluded before the first tank moved because American systems had already mapped every Cuban military asset, penetrated their communications networks, corrupted their sensor data, and prepared engagement sequences for every threat. The Cuban commander who ordered the mobilization understood this. His intelligence staff provided the same analysis you are hearing now. He ordered the mobilization anyway because the alternative, capitulation without resistance, was politically unacceptable. So the tanks rolled. The reserves mobilized. The fuel burned. And the countdown continues. 57 days of fuel under mobilization loading. Less now. 43 days until critical shortage. Every day that passes strengthens the American position because time itself is a weapon when your adversary consumes irreplaceable resources. The USS Iwo Jima maintains station. The carrier strike group maintains readiness. The F-35s maintain air superiority that Cuban forces cannot contest. And the Nemesis system continues feeding phantom threats into radar networks, forcing decisions that accelerate the cognitive collapse. This is modern warfare, bloodless until the moment it becomes surgical, invisible until the moment it becomes absolute, fought in electromagnetic spectrum and logistics networks before a single weapon fires. The outcome was never in doubt. The only question was whether Cuban leadership would recognize reality or force a demonstration. The fuel reserves dictate the timeline. Thermodynamics enforces the conclusion. American victory is inevitable not through force, but through comprehensive informational and logistical dominance. We do not need to invade. We need only to wait while our adversary strangles on their own obsolescence. The museum army rolls toward empty tanks and dark skies, and the professionals analyzing this scenario understand exactly what that means.